Welcome to the Hormone Hub, your go-to source for the conversations every woman in her 40s and 50s needs to have. I'm your host, Kylie Pinwill, your nutritionist helping you navigate your way through perimenopause, menopause and beyond so you can say goodbye to the endless fatigue, unexplained weight gain, hot flushes, PMS, mood changes and more that come on this hormonal roller coaster. If you missed the memo or think this is only for women of a certain age, ladies, it's time to think again. Now sit back, relax and enjoy the show. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss any of my latest episodes, which are released every week. Share it with your friends, your sweaty sisters. The more we talk, the more we help each other. Hello, ladies. Welcome back to the Hormone Hub. Now, today we are doing a bit of a U-turn and we are talking about your physical health and well-being. And today I am, very happy to have a friend of mine, Kath Baquie. I hope I've said that right, Kath. Join us. Now, Kath is a pelvic health physio. So she specialises in women's health and all things pelvic floor, and all things, that a physio would normally deal with as well. So she's talking about our overall well-being. Kath is the owner of the Fit Nest Mama, so you can find her website there. And we're going to pop all of her details in the show notes, of course. But welcome to the show, Kath.
Thank you, Kylie, for having me. It's great to chat today.
Yes. Now, Kath and I have been chatting away for 15 minutes before I was like, oh, we better hit record.
Yeah.
So, Kath, would you like to tell us a bit about your background and, what it is that you do?
Yeah, so I'm a physiotherapist. I graduated school not knowing what I want to be, and I just knew that I didn't want a desk job. So I went into physio, I think like all young students, thinking they'd be drawn to the sports physio and all those really well-known aspects of physio. And I soon discovered my first job on a footy field in the middle of winter, cold in Melbourne, massaging sweaty hamstrings. I was like, nah, this is not for me.
I've got a few friends who are physios and stuff.
And I got a placement in women's health, and I fell in love as a 20-year-old, bouncing around on footballs with pregnant women, helping women with their pelvic health. And eventually I ended up doing postgraduate training at university and specialising in this area.
Yeah, beautiful. And, our pelvic floor is such a fascinating thing. It really is. And I think anyone who's had a baby realises the importance, but it isn't just women who've had children. Like I've had clients who haven't had children and they still have pelvic floor issues. So I think it's just a massive design fault, to be honest.
Well, absolutely. It's a design fault, but also we need that design. Like our pelvis compared to our male counterparts, they are wider. So it's like having a small trampoline versus a big trampoline. There's obviously going to be more movement in the base of the trampoline on a wider trampoline. So we do need that movement, obviously, to be able to have children. Plus, we're lucky enough to have all the hormonal changes, as you know. So those two combinations in particular, not even including the third combination, which is a childbirth, pregnancy and childbirth. Yeah. So even if you haven't had babies, you're still a female with a female pelvis. And you still got the hormonal changes.
Yeah, definitely. And it's that drop in estrogen that, as we go through perimenopause and menopause, that seems to be the cause of many of our, issues.
Everything drops, doesn't it? We've got some sags under our chin and eyes and our boobs.
The turkey neck, my daughter calls it. She was funny. She grabbed my husband's turkey neck and she's like, oh, you got a turkey neck. And I was like, oh, thank God she's leaving me alone for a change. The 10-year-old girls, everyone needs one. Yeah. But Kath, we were chatting beforehand and I sort of realised for the first time the value of a pelvic floor specialist and a pelvic floor physio when I was sitting in a menopause conference and, this physio was up, she was speaking and she started talking about, a lot of the things that actually hit home for me. and I've always been quite fit. I've always been healthy. I did all the prenatal, all the postnatal Pilates. I did all the things, bounced on the Swiss ball, forever, all the things. But she was talking about, people who women avoiding, exercising in the afternoons because, their bladder's fuller and, they're more prone to leaking. And I was like, oh my God, that's me. I deliberately don't exercise in the afternoon because of that. And, just that cough that takes you by surprise, or that sneeze that takes you by surprise. Laughing has caught me by surprise a few times. And she was sort of talking about, it is sort of normal, and, what she was describing, kind of I ticked the boxes for my sort of age and stage of life, regardless of my fitness background, it just didn't even sort of seem to matter. But she was sort of going through, a lot of really practical things that we can access and tap into with the support of a pelvic physio specialist, to help us. Because, in the back of my mind, I was sort of thinking, is this leading to a hysterectomy? And I was just in my head going, yeah, no. And that's probably why I was in denial and kind of not being proactive about it. And generally, I'm quite proactive about my own health. And I certainly encourage women to be very proactive with their health. But yeah, I was in a bit of denial about this. And yeah, she sort of took me by surprise of some of the symptoms and some of the things I wasn't even aware of. So maybe we can sort of go into like, what are, if we've got women in their 40s and 50s and 60s, what are some of the things that, little warning signs or little symptoms that present that, we can actually do something about?
Yeah, great question, Carly. It's a big question, but it's a great one. Because you're right, I have friends in their 40s, late 30s, 40s, finished having children. And one friend in particular is really keen. Well, she's a big basketballer before having kids, and she loved playing with a basketball team. And so she started recently, and she tells me about how before every game, a lot of her teammates are having to run to the toilet. They're saying that they're having to use pads for the game, and they're just accepting it. And you're right, it is common, but I don't think we should consider it normal, because there is so much, and it's exciting because there is so much we can do to help our pelvic health and this area. And as you said, it's an area we don't talk about much, and then suddenly we're pregnant, we have children, and everyone hears about pelvic floor. We might then have our babies and sort of forget about it for a while, and then in these perimenopausal years, it tends to rear its head again. So we know that there's a spike of issues around pregnancy and childbirth, then it plateaus off, and then the other spike happens around this time of our life, perimenopause, menopause. And as you said, hormones are a big factor here. But some red flags. If you're listening to this today and you're thinking, oh yeah, I do leak, whether or not it's when you're coughing or sneezing or laughing or moving or exercising, that it in itself is a red flag, and don't accept that it's normal, because there could be something that you can do. Absolutely. Another red flag is pelvic organ prolapse symptoms, and these can be quite varied. Yep. So this might be really obvious in terms of you're seeing a bulge, or you're feeling a bulge when you have a shower or go to the toilet, or you might feel a lump, like there's something just stuck in your vagina. Some women describe it as feeling like there's a tampon stuck, even though they don't have a tampon in. Some women describe it as a pelvic heaviness and a dragging sensation. And I know that's what I experienced after the birth of my first baby. I went for a walk a few weeks later, and again, I felt really good physically. Yep. So I'd been strong and active during pregnancy. I was fit, so to speak, with quotation marks. But my pelvic health was my weakest link, and I've started to feel this massive heaviness. And I said to my husband, I feel like I have a ton of bricks sitting on top of my pelvic floor. Yep. So that's another red flag, any of those sort of prolapsy symptoms. Then there's bowel symptoms as a red flag. So if you're having difficulty emptying your bowels, constipation, this might be related, or any fecal incontinence, which is unfortunately also quite common and even less talked about than urinary incontinence.
Yeah, very much.
But it could be an issue with pelvic floor weakness, or it could be an issue with pelvic floor overactivity, or a combination of both. So if you've got overactive pelvic floor, they're having trouble relaxing, and that's when you might have the issues with constipation, difficulty opening your bowels, pain in your pelvis, like pelvic pain. Women who've had a past history of endometriosis or any of those chronic pelvic conditions can sometimes have pelvic pain. Painful sex is another indication of a red flag. Yeah, so if in doubt, check it out.
Yeah, 100%. And so what, so let's talk, because sex is something that, we're not talking about. And, a lot of women do experience painful sex. And, I think it's a conversation that we need to have. And I sort of, with my clients, sort of always look at it from a, like a lubrication side, do they feel uncomfortable wearing tight jeans? So it's more that hormonal, that drop in estrogen, that dryness, and I hate the term vaginal atrophy. Like what male gorilla came up with that? But it's, but so I sort of always think of it from a dryness hormonal sort of, but it can actually be pelvic floor issues too.
Yeah. So sexual discomfort is quite common. Again, as you said, I think that we don't talk about it enough. And there are potential different causes of pain. So I guess the big thing is identifying when it's painful. Is it on penetration, or is it more of a deeper pain? You're right. Vaginal dryness is a huge factor potentially. As you say, the term atrophy. I think all of our muscles as we get older become a bit thinner, and our pelvic floor is one area we want a nice plump, full muscle. So rather than a thin, stretched muscle. So that can definitely have an impact. But as you know, it's not just the physical side, it's the emotional, feeling tired, all those sides. But in terms of the physical aspects, the first thing would be identifying where the pain is coming from. So you might need to see a pelvic floor physio for that. It might be a simple matter of trialing a different lubricant, and that in itself is there's so many different lubricants around. I have one, I'll have to quickly bring up who it is. It's called the Lovers brand, and it's a gynecologist who has created this, Dr. Raya Liu. It's called Lovers Products on Instagram, and she's got different types of lubricants based on different needs. So I'd highly recommend her because one lubricant from the supermarket, a water-based lubricant, potentially isn't what you need. You might need an oil-based lubricant or one. So highly recommend checking out. And I've done a podcast episode with Raylia too on my podcast.
Yeah, great. Okay, we'll get those details and we'll pop them in our show notes.
So the dryness is an issue. If it's something like prolapse, which is causing pain, that can be really common too. So if your cervix is sitting a bit lower than normal or than it used to, the penis could just be banging on the cervix and causing that discomfort. So then sometimes we can discuss positioning or making sure you're in the position of control so you can gauge how deep penetration is. There's so many. Do you want me to keep going with some recommendations? There's something called the O-nut, which is amazing. An O-nut is this silicone ring that your partner can put on the base of their pelvis, and that helps to reduce the penetration depth. So if it is an issue with the cervical prolapse, an O-nut might be fabulous. And apparently they feel really good for your partner too, so it doesn't reduce the sensations.
This Hormone Hub episode is sponsored by our free Hormone Help call. On the call, we'll give you some clarity around what's causing your symptoms and the 3 simple steps you can start using straight away. If you're ready to take the next step and find out how we can help you, we can talk about that too. So if you're constantly feeling tired, struggling with weight gain, PMS, mood swings, bloating, not sleeping at night, cravings, anxiety, all the things, we're ready to help. If you're ready to ditch those sugar cravings, regain your energy and shift that stubborn weight, then let us help you balance your hormones, reset your metabolism and get your confidence back so you can live the life you're meant to. The link with the details to our hormone help call is in our show notes or over at kyliepinwell.com.
So pelvic floor muscle strengthening is huge. So there are, I guess to boil it all down, there's so many different options depending on what your issue is. So that's where that individualized assessment can be really helpful.
Yeah, perfect. And I think, it is important to get assessed, and you don't need a doctor's referral. If you find a pelvic floor specialist, a physio who's a specialist in pelvic floor, go and see them, book in. You don't need a doctor's appointment. You don't need to see a gynecologist. You don't need, and then you get that assessment done. There could be exercises involved. There could be recommendations for certain products, so it doesn't have to be surgery, which is, like if you see a surgeon, they're going to recommend surgery. So, but there are steps that we can do before it gets to that.
I tend to consider it in terms of four tiers. So the first, easiest one to tackle, a lifestyle. So looking at your daily lifestyle. How fit and strong and active are you? What's your exercise program? What's your diet like? Because we want the bowels to be functioning well, because there's a really close relationship between bowels and pelvic floor issues. So looking at those general lifestyle factors firstly, and then secondly, going on to pelvic floor muscle strengthening. Because that in itself can be, if you've menopause, if you've had babies, you can probably not everyone, but majority of the time it's as a result of pelvic floor muscle weakness. So this is when some really beautiful strengthening around the pelvic floor muscles can be really helpful. But let's face it, they are boring. I get it. They're easy to forget. They're easy to not prioritize. You forget to do them. We're all busy.
Yeah.
So it can be tricky to commit to a burst of pelvic floor strengthening.
But
You're putting your hand up.
I'm putting my hand up for guilty of not doing them.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, when you start doing them, you kind of, for me, I didn't notice how effective they were until I stopped doing them. While I was doing it, my pelvic floor felt great, and all those little leaks that I was having stopped. And then I got slack. I stopped doing the exercises, and then I would sneeze, and I'm like, back to the exercises. And I just got in the habit of, it was the first thing I did when I woke up in the morning, and it was the last thing I did before I went to bed. So I had my rubber band, and I would just my husband just he just got used to it, really.
Wait, you had your rubber band?
Yeah, so from my physio that I saw, just on my knee, like around my knees. What are the bands called? I've got a TheraBand. Yeah. So I had my TheraBand, and I would do my exercises with my TheraBand before bed and after, when I got up in the morning. So and that's great. You found a habit, a habit for you, and you were able to tap pelvic floor exercises into another activity, like going to bed. And I think that's key. Like I know with I do online workouts for online exercise classes, and I'd never finish a workout without doing a set of pelvic floor exercises, because everyone's already invested. They've already done 20 or 30 minutes of exercise. What's another 2 minutes? Just stay and do your pelvic floor exercises. So there are ways of weaving your pelvic floor into everyday activities or your exercise, and so that it does get done. Absolutely. And that's it. If it's a commitment.
But
one of those things, you notice how good they are when you're not doing them.
And if you are finding traditional pelvic floor exercises boring, there are other ways to jazz it up a bit. There's devices out there. There's these Bluetooth There's biofeedback solutions, so we can put an electrode or a probe insert it into your vagina. You've got this on an app on your phone, and you can play sort of games. You're jumping over mountains, and there's all these like really cool apps and Bluetooth devices to help incentivize, keep it interesting. So if you are finding traditional pelvic floor exercises just not doing it for you, there's some other options. Vaginal weights. So that was when I'd go, that's more the third tier. So we talked about lifestyle, then the good old traditional muscle strengthening and core exercises. And then the third tier would be, what other devices are there? So that's whether or not it's some vaginal weights or biofeedback, something to incentivize your pelvic floor muscle training, or whether or not that's pessaries. So I don't know how much you want to talk about pessaries, but if you've got...
Talk us through the pessary. Yep.
Yeah, okay. So if you've got a pelvic organ prolapse or even some types of urinary incontinence, there are different types of pessaries. So pretty much what it is silicone, nice and bendable. It's an insert that you can put into your vagina. It might be a ring, it might be a cube. There's lots of different shapes and sizes depending on what we're trying to do. Yep. So a pessary is something that could hold up a prolapse. So you pop it in like a tampon and it stays inside, and it might support your prolapse so that you don't feel symptoms. Yep. And some women might use a pessary just before they go for a run or before they do exercise or they go out and about. So like they pop it in the morning and then they take it out before bed. Yeah. Whereas other women might have a longer term pessary that a gynecologist would put in and keep it in for a certain period of time. Yeah. But again, that's something that you'd need to be assessed either by a gynecologist or a pelvic health physio that specializes in pessaries. But that could also be an amazing one just for keeping your symptoms at bay. It might be all that you need. It might fit in really well with your lifestyle. And then there's some women that would hate the thought of putting in pessary. And then the fourth tier would be perhaps surgical intervention. Yeah.
Well, I think it's good to know that there's so much we can do before we get there.
Yeah, absolutely. And surgical intervention isn't necessarily going to be an option for you, or, that's something to talk to your doctor about. There's always pros and cons of any of this sort of stuff. So it's a matter of talking through the pros and the cons. And I really do think we want to have trialed the first three before even thinking about the fourth, because the first three are very low risk. There can only be the potential benefit. So why not consider these three first? And then even if you do have surgery, we still need to consider the lifestyle and the exercise. 100%. The post-surgical rehab is super important. And that's something that also gets neglected. I think sometimes doctors might say, okay, let's have surgery, rest for 6 weeks, have that 6-week checkup. It's like having a baby, isn't it? Have that 6-week checkup. Yeah. Looking great. See you later. Call me if there's any. Yeah. Whereas that rehab, and this is why I developed my program, whether or not it's postnatal rehab or post-gynecological surgical rehab, like there's so much we can do to help support our pelvic health, to help support our strength in this area and help us feel more confident and feel good.
And I think a sort of pretty scary sort of statistic is, like the second biggest reason for women being admitted into nursing homes is incontinence. So, the first reason is dementia. The second reason is incontinence. So if we can do something about it now, in our 40s, 50s, 60s, it's going to help us when we're in our 80s and 90s, 100%. We get this one body.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And the more we can be proactive about our health, including our gynecological health, the more we can do now, the better off we're going to be in the long term, 100%.
Oh, preventative health, it's so good. It's but it's also... there's a lot of treatment options that sound a lot more sexy. Help reduce pain with this and help lose weight by doing this. Whereas
the cookie diet.
Exactly. But to sell prevention or this sort of stuff is so life-changing, but it's not as sexy to say, come and do this so that you don't get, XYZ, whatever it might be. So it's certainly, it takes I think there is a big shift happening at the moment. People are becoming more aware of the power of prevention.
Yep.
And it's amazing, but still our private health insurance doesn't usually cover this preventative stuff. It covers you after.
Yes.
And same with our healthcare system.
It's all backwards. I know.
It's backwards. So yeah, you and me are both on the same page here.
About that, yeah. All right, Kath. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I think this is going to be really helpful for a lot of ladies. And, if your take-home message, for those who are listening, your take-home message is you do not have to put up with this. There is so much we can do. Get yourself assessed by a pelvic floor, physio. You don't need a referral. You don't need, Google one, or, Kath's got programs online. So, there's so much support out there, but get assessed. Don't just suffer in silence. You don't want to be the nana who ends up in the nursing home because she wees herself, telling it to you straight. So thank you, Kath. And I think it's, definitely another area of women's health that we need to be talking more about and, bringing awareness to, so we can, be proactive and do something for ourselves.
Yeah, that's great. And often it is that first step of becoming aware of it. And if anyone wants to send me a question, if you're not sure about the next step for you or who to go and see, feel free to send me a message on Instagram at FitnestMama. So I'm happy to help.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Kath. That's very generous. And we'll pop all of Kath's details in the show notes for you.
Great. Thanks, Kylie.
Thank you.
Lovely to chat.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you for taking the time to listen today. You can head on over to the show notes at kyliepinwell.com/podcast, where you'll find all the links, and I have a little bonus surprise waiting for you. Before we go, it would mean the world to me if you head on over to your favourite podcasts channel, subscribe and leave a review. Make sure to screenshot it, DM it to me so I can thank you personally. Then stay tuned for next week's episode. Can't wait to see you then.